Welcome to CivilNet. My guest from Istanbul is Suncem Kocher. She's an assistant professor at Kadir Has University in Istanbul. Suncem, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You are here in Yerevan on what is called the Hrant Dink Travel Grant.
Yes, that's true.
Tell us what that's about and what are you doing here?
Okay, Hrant Dink Foundation just opened this travel grant program, and this is the second round that they're giving it. And I applied to come to Yerevan with a particular project. I'm an anthropologist and anthropologist of media, I'd like to call myself. So I work on news culture in Turkey, how news are produced, how meanings are attached, how ideologies and propaganda is circulated in the news culture in Turkey. And I said, this is a great opportunity to be in Yerevan and get to learn a little bit about Armenian news culture, as well as the role of the journalists in the normalization process between Turkey and Armenia. So I applied with that project to the grant, and thankfully I got it, so I'm here.
And you were here today at CivilNet with us, sort of observing and interviewing and asking questions about how media culture is in our country. I think it would be interesting for our viewers to understand how media works in Turkey as well. We follow the news. We do reports from Istanbul. We come and we go. But so if you're not a Turkish speaker, there's limited number of publications that are in English. So tell us about the culture of media in Turkey, and is it polarized like the politics is?
Oh, it is. You can see everything in terms of the intensity and tension in politics represented or reflected on media. And it's very interesting to compare it with the culture here, news culture here. As I was talking to journalists this week, Armenian journalists, some of them were saying there is no censorship here, but there are some transparency issues which create self-censorship. This is the case in Turkey, plus we have censorship.
So it's a double burden.
Yeah, and especially the political power is directly speaking to journalists like this. As they speak about politics, they are really involving the journalists in that political storm. So it is highly polarized.
Okay, the role of a journalist in general, globally. I mean, you're an expert in this field, and you're also you have a television program on İmece TV. It's called Media Atlasi, which is a media analysis program. So because in societies where society is polarized, where politics is polarized, where there is so much tension, what is the role of the journalist?
Well, yeah.
I know that's a very sort of
it's a difficult and large question, but speaking of my observation in Turkey, for instance, or in general, I mean, a newsmaker is the reality maker, right? I mean, it's such a responsibility because as much as we'd like to think that news are based on facts,
oftentimes subjective.
So I think the role of the journalist is, first of all, to reflexively take a look at himself or herself to know about his or her baggage in life, right? How to relate, how he or she relates to life, reality, politics, culture, people, so on and so forth. Because everybody has a cultural baggage, everybody has a political baggage, but if you don't acknowledge that, you just think that you are doing objective journalism.
But in reality, you're not.
No, and then it's a misrepresentation of what you're doing, so.
Okay, talk to me about the media world in Turkey specifically. There's print media, there's broadcast media, there's internet, television. They all have their political tendencies, leanings. And if you belong, because at the end of the day, you're a journalist, but you're also a citizen of that country. You're also part of the process taking place in the country. And you're right, it's very difficult to separate yourself, all of that baggage which you talked about, to try and present the facts. Do journalists come out and say that I am a supporter of the Erdogan government, or I am in opposition, and then work accordingly, or do they try to hide all of that and then work within that sort of bubble that they've created, this pretension of
Yeah, I mean, mostly like that. I mean, they just disguise themselves under this huge word of objectivity, right? I mean, it's interesting. Those politicized journalists, they do news according to their political engagements, but they say they are objective. At the same time, we have journalists in prison, for instance, and the prime minister says, no, they are not journalists, they are terrorists. So it's like, it's underneath the name of journalism versus you are doing journalism but you become terrorists. It's kind of like that difficulty of naming the practice or talking critically about that practice. What is interesting though in Turkey, even though it's a polarized news culture often, what interests me a lot as a media anthropologist, for instance, is that how news, especially about certain things, how different papers, they share the same language when it comes to certain things. Like women, for instance, I mean, they can unite against women sometimes.
So they rise above their partisan or their political sort of position to tackle women's issues together.
No, quite
the opposite.
The opposite.
Really?
I mean, it's like, for instance, we have like a lot of women murders happening in Turkey by men, and the ways in which they are represented, the language in which they are represented, different perspectives, they get united in, you know, portraying that reality, or with the Kurdish issue, or with the Armenian issue, so on and so forth. There are certain things that they can unite very well. I'm not talking positively here, it's like negative terms. Within a very polarized news culture. This is very interesting to me, I mean.
Okay, you know, as a specialist in the field, you know, you have a PhD in this and you study it and you continue to study it and you lecture about it. It's curious for me. You and I both live in countries where there's quite a bit of instability, there's political, social polarization, there's self-censorship, there's outright censorship. Media globally, though, if we were to look at media, is there such a thing as objective media anywhere on the planet?
What do you think?
I think I know the answer, but I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think no. I mean, and I don't. This is gonna sound a little postmodern, and I hate that, but I don't believe in objectivity. I mean, or I define objectivity in different terms. Maybe it's the face your baggage. Know who you are as a journalist, as a mediator of facts, right? Between different groups of people. And same for anthropology too. I mean, for instance, know your colonial engagement as an anthropologist, face it, acknowledge it, and write from there. I mean, it's important. That is
being honest, isn't it?
Yeah, that gets us closer to what we call objectivity, rather than we don't exist kind of thing.
And then the person reading or viewing or listening to your report knows where you're coming from, and then can make an engaged or informed decision based on that. You know, because when the media environment, a very seasoned journalist once told me that if you want to get to the truth in Armenia, there are 3 or 4 different publications you need to read. You need to read a pro-government publication, you need to read a radical opposition, something in between, about the same event. And the report might be radically different from one another. And then to try and understand what really is happening. So it's interesting. It's very difficult for the average citizen to understand what's happening. It's difficult for the journalist to present those facts. It's difficult for the news agencies also to be forthright.
Very much so. But we owe that information, we owe that positionality to our readership, and readers and followers, or like media consumers, need to be more savvy about you know, how reality is constructed through news. So as you say, look for different sources, combine the facts, and also know where you are standing too.
How reality is constructed. It doesn't exist, it is constructed, isn't it? Sunjam, what do you hope to accomplish at the end of your visit here in Yerevan? You're going to be presenting, you're going to be publishing a paper or a video report? What will you be doing?
So I'm seeing journalists here, talking with journalists and getting some information about the Armenian news culture, plus the normalization project process and the role of the journalist.
And how it's represented by different news agencies in Armenia?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. So what I'm going to do when I go back is, one, I want to do a show for Medya Atlası on my media show on İmece TV to talk about my observations, plus show the clip that I did in CivilNet, how I talk to people. Probably I'll host someone from the foundation, Foundation. I hope to do that. I'll also write a piece for a journal, a popular journal, and maybe a newspaper. But later, if I can develop my findings and data, I'd like to write an academic report to a different kind of audience when I go back, hopefully.
Well, Sunjam, thank you very much
for
shedding some light and explaining to us the very complex world of media. Complex, complicated, I don't know, there's a million adjectives we could use. And I think that the message here is that when we are constructing reality, we be true to our cultural and sort of historical baggage that we all carry, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Sunjam Kocher. She's an assistant professor at Kadir Has University in Istanbul. Stay with CivilNet.